goodness. Okay. Good morning, everybody.
Good
morning, Rabbi.
morning.
Good morning.
Hey, how is everybody doing?
We're doing
Quite
good.
well. How are you?
Good.
Great.
Good. So today, so we've got these three classes on ethics, and today's class is the one where we talk about the most important ethics, I think. I mean, not it's hard to rank things. All ethics are important, but I'll demonstrate why I think these kind of cover the sort of the broader picture and include so many of the ways we think about how to be a good person. So that's what we're going to talk about today. It's love your neighbor and how we speak. So I'm going to start with the how we speak part because our country is in such divisive disarray right now. So I want to show you something that will maybe startling for some people. This is a brochure or a pamphlet, whatever, short little pamphlet that I wrote when I was still in rabbinical school. So as a movement, many national church organizations, national Jewish organizations decide they need to issue resolutions, policies that what do we believe, what do we stand for? And the Organization of Conservative Synagogues is called the United Synagogues of Conservative Judaism, not a very creative name. And so they include all the conservative synagogues here in this country, as well as the Masorti congregations in Israel and in Europe and Canada and in Latin America. And they get together, they used to get together every 2 years for a convention. And at these conventions would pass some resolutions about, social or political issues of the day that they felt they want to take a position on. So in 1996, I think it was, the convention passed a number of resolutions, and one of them was that we want to promote civility and courtesy in public discourse. Imagine that in 1996, that was like almost 30 years ago already, 25 years ago. And things we thought were horrible then, just horrible. People were just not nice to each other in the political arena or other areas. And so we wanted to promote civility and courtesy in public discourse. And so as an action step after adopting this grandiose resolution was to create a pamphlet that discussed Jewish values from Jewish sources that discussed this important topic. And then they handed off the writing of that pamphlet to a rabbinical student, which happened to be me. So this is what I wrote, and it's just kind of, wow, you look back 25 years ago, and if we had only known then what we know now, we would have thought we were in paradise. But in any case, so just this opening paragraph, the Commission on Social Action and Public Policy of United Synagogue is pleased to present this publication. In recent years, public discourse, particularly in the political arena, has become increasingly shrill. The airwaves seem at times to be flooded with radio shock jocks who spout the most inflammatory remarks imaginable. Their ratings apparently thrive on the controversy they foment. Accordingly, more talk show hosts are encouraged to use strong language in order to obtain high ratings. Similarly, politicians are aware that unless they use spicy language, the news media will not report what they have to say. A soundbite may have some bite to it. One factor that may promote a lack of civility is the extent of public attention paid to those whose language or behavior is outrageous. Wow, anyway, and I would have to say, I watch the news a lot myself. I feel it's part of my civic responsibility as well as my responsibility as a rabbi and speaker to see what's going on in the news and who's saying what. Of course, I have my own favorite channels like everybody does. And I do, although I trust generally the news sources, I have to remind myself that this is still part of the process. They want people coming back day after day to come watch their news show. And fear and anger are two powerful motivators for people to come back and watch more. They want to get those powerful emotions driven. So I do think that even though I do believe in mainstream media, I think they make an effort to report the truth, to get multiple sources, multiple qualified sources, multiple respectable and believable sources to support the things that they say. How they report them, the words they use to report them, and how they slant the article definitely is part of their own bias, whether it's recognized or not. And then maybe to some extent, and depending on the news channel you're listening to a greater extent, is designed to inflame you and get your emotions going, so you'll come back next week to watch the next, or tomorrow to watch the next episode to get more worked up. So we do need to be aware of that, and I think that's only gotten much, much worse today. People, as a result of that, it's very hard to talk to people if you're from the other party, right? How, we point fingers at each other and say, how can you believe these lies? How can you trust these people? And it doesn't, and it's become quite a problem. Anyway, so this pamphlet that I wrote when I was in rabbinical school, it then quotes many, many sources in these opening paragraphs, and I kind of gave you headline topics for each one. And maybe we'll come back to this, but it occurred to me that since I wrote this pamphlet, I wrote another thing that I now want to share with you, and I didn't include it in the handouts. So we'll make sure we send it out after this program. In fact, what I can do is I will let me send it to you now in a link. Set it up as a link. Hold it. It'll just take me 1 minute to set it up as a link. I think it'll. Well, we'll do it later. Let's go through this now. So what I did was I wrote 10 commandments for civility in public discourse. And what I did was I distilled a lot of the ideas from that earlier pamphlet that I had written into a one-page 10 commandments format. So the first and most important commandment that many people in Jewish sources say is the most important mitzvah is love your neighbor as yourself. And for those of you who are raised in the Christian tradition, you know that Jesus also said this is an important commandment, right? He was asked, what's the most important commandment in the Torah, which was a reasonable question for Jews to ask during Jesus' time. And Jesus is a preacher teacher. He is learned in Jewish texts, and he gives his opinion. So although his opinion we don't quote because it's, his body of literature is not part of our sacred literature, it's a pretty good quote. So he answered this person, what's the most important commandment? He said there's actually two most important commandments, and they are love your neighbor as yourself, which is from Leviticus 19:18, as I point out over here, and love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your strength, which is from Deuteronomy. And we recite that twice every day as part of reciting the Shema, which is an important statement of faith in the Jewish tradition. So Jesus' summary of Judaism is really accurate. And again, it highlights that even he thought love your neighbor as yourself was one of the most important commandments. So we don't quote Jesus, but we do have a very important rabbi in the Talmud whose name was Rabbi Akiba, who is very highly respected in the Talmud. And he said the same thing. He said the most important commandment is love your neighbor as yourself. And so now in blue, I just comment on this. Remember that even when you strongly disagree with another person on a particular subject, he or she is still your neighbor, right? I have to say I'm guilty of this as well sometimes. It's not easy to do, but we need to remember that as crazy as some things sound to us, They're still a human being. And we need to figure out what makes them think the way they do. They're independent thinkers. We prize freedom in this country. And in Judaism, we say everybody is created in God's image. So we need to try and understand the other person, even if we disagree with somebody, and there are people I politically disagree with, but they're members of our congregation. We welcome them into our congregation, of course, as we welcome everybody. And whatever's going on in their life, we want to be able to be there to support them. One of the things that I've recently come to realize, I do interfaith work, which means that I regularly meet with people who have different religious beliefs than I do, right? And I don't get angry about it. I understand it. I say, okay, I get it. It's not how I think, but I see that that's how you think. It has a logical consistency to it. And religion is a matter of belief, and different people believe different things. So that's okay. So I'm thinking that, I need to bring more of that into the way I think about political differences, and not to be upset about what another person thinks. It's just, everybody's entitled to have their own set of beliefs. I don't know. It's a complicated subject, but that's one thing to keep in mind. The next thing is Hillel, another highly respected rabbi in the Talmud, and who lived the generation right before Jesus, didn't quote Leviticus, love your neighbor as yourself, but as we've talked about a few times, I think he said, he rephrased it. He said, what you find hateful, don't do to other people, right? The rest is commentary, go and study, right? So that is kind of a treat others the way you would like to be treated. And if you would find something hateful, then don't do it to somebody else. So I just comment on that. What would you say these things about someone else if they were standing in front of you at the time? One of the problems we have in this cyberspace world we live in, especially now with coronavirus, when we're not meeting each other in person as much, we meet each other on the internet, and particularly on Facebook or other kind of social media places where we don't actually see the other person. We read what they write, we get really pissed off, and then we write something really horrible and ugly in response. And so the question is, before you hit the send key, stop and think, if this person was actually standing next to me, would I say this to them, to their face? And if it's something you would not want to say to their face, maybe you should rephrase what you're saying. You don't have to change your point of view. You can still express your point of view, but try and present it in a way that is polite and respectful and not stoking more fire, like trying to promote understanding rather than more confrontation. How would you express your disagreement with them if they were standing there? Would you want them to say things like that about you? So that's commandment number 2 in my 10 commandments here. Number 3 is, of course, another important principle in Judaism, B'Tselem Elohim, which means in the image of God. Tselem is an image, and Elohim is the Hebrew word for God. So and it's a recognition that human beings are all created in God's image. This comes from in a commentary on the book of Genesis, a contemporary of Rabbi Akiva, whose name is Ben Azai, said this is the most important statement of the Torah. The most important statement is not love your neighbor as yourself. The most important statement is to remind ourselves that we're all created in God's image. Now, Ben Azai is an interesting guy. His first name is not Ben. Ben means son, right? So his name really means son of Azai. And so I think if I remember correctly, his first name was actually Shimon, but he's never called by Shimon or Simon. He's always called Ben Azai. And the other thing that's notable about his name is it doesn't have rabbi in front of it, right? Most of the rabbis in the Talmud are called rabbi. He's not, which means he never actually got smicha. He was never certified as a rabbi. He was just a scholar. But for whatever reason, even though he wasn't certified, people recognized his wisdom, and he is quoted in many places in the Talmud. So he is a contemporary of Rabbi Akiva, and he said, the most important thing to remember when you're talking to another person is not love your neighbor as yourself, but remember that they are an image of God. So when you see, when we're able to, out of this virus pandemic, when we back to see each other face to face, you should see the spark of divine holiness in the other person's eyes, and do not shame them or embarrass them. That's what Ben Azai added. He said, if you were to think, well, I should shame and embarrass this person the way he shamed and embarrassed me, then stop and think, he is made in the image of God, right? And I need to find a way to defend myself, certainly, defend my position, but not in a way that humiliates or shames somebody. These are not easy things to do, by the way, right? If they were easy, they wouldn't be commandments, right? They'd just be, well, this is what everybody does. So it's tough. There's another important statement of Hillel found in a collection of wisdom literature called Avot. So that's what this Avot thing is over here. It's chapter 1, statement number 12. So Hillel said, be of the disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace. So here he's referring to Aaron, Moses' brother. There's the idea in rabbinic literature is that Moses' brother was a peacemaker. And this comes mostly from the story of the golden calf. If you read that story of the golden calf, right, the Israelites are standing at Mount Sinai. They get the 10 Commandments, loud booming voice, thunder and lightning, the earth is shaking, fire on the mountain, very dramatic scene. And the first 2 commandments are, at least the way we count commandments, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt, right? So you have to believe that there's one God who took you out of Egypt. And number 2, don't make graven images. And like everybody agrees that everybody standing at the mountain heard those 2 commandments at least. And at some point they said, Moses, we can't stand this. It's terrifying to us. It's too scary. We'll die of fright. Go up the mountain and talk to God. Come back and tell us the rest of the story. But at least those first 2 commandments, they got directly from God. So Moses goes up the mountain and he's gone for, a little longer than they thought. And right away, they're building a golden calf. Like, what's the matter with these people? They just heard this dramatic scene with the thunder and the lightning and the shaking of the fire and everything else, and don't make a graven image. And the next thing they do is make a golden calf. And not only that, but Aaron's brother, his own brother, helps them to create this golden calf. How did he do this? Why? What was he thinking? And so one rabbinic understanding of this was he was trying to make peace. These people were, okay, I think I can safely ridicule QAnon in this crowd, right? They were like QAnon believers, right? They still believed that God had a shape, a form. They were believing in fantasies and craziness. And he's trying to calm them down and prevent them from rioting until Moses can come back and create some order, right? So he's trying to keep the peace down here. So he's stalling for time, right? And trying to calm them down. And that's partly what he was engaged in. And then they add to that he would in other ways, he was trying to promote peace. So they tell this interesting story. 2 men are fighting against each other. They hate each other's guts. And so he would go to the first guy, John, let's say. He'd say, John, Jerry really wants to apologize to you, but he's too embarrassed to do that. He feels very badly about the relationship. He wants to fix it, but he's hesitant to come forward and be the first one to apologize. Why don't you go up to him and tell him you're sorry, and then you'll see it'll work out. And then he goes to Jerry and he says the same thing. John really wants to apologize to you, but he's too embarrassed to be the first one to come forward. Why don't you go over to him and just apologize, and it'll work out, right? And so, of course, the 2 people meet and they make up and they become friends again. So they tell stories like this about Aaron. Of course, it's not in the text, but why do rabbis tell stories like that? Because they wanted their congregants to behave like that, right? And they're saying, look, we have this role model here, Aaron, who was a peacemaker, who would do stuff like that. So Hillel here is saying, I'm going to go back to the text. Hillel here is saying, be like the disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace. Try to find ways to bridge the gap between people and try to promote understanding and so on. Okay. And I didn't put in who said this, but this one is actually Shammai. Oh yeah, it does say Shammai here. Yeah. I put a question mark, right? So I think we told the stories about Hillel and Shammai, right? The people who want to convert, and they come first to Shammai, and with some they want to convert, but they have some little quirky thing that they want that seems pretty crazy. And Shammai is the one who hits them over the head with a stick, and then they go down to Hillel, and Hillel says, okay, no problem, I can do this, right? So he is practicing what he preaches. He's being of the disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace, and trying to get people to understand how we think about things that's different from how they think. Shammai was not so welcoming at first, but nevertheless, in the same source, Avot, just a couple statements after Hillel, Shammai says, receive everyone with a cheerful countenance. Obviously, he didn't take his own advice all the time, but he at least had the right idea, right? So, you know what's amazing is smiling. I had a couple teachers, some of my most beloved teachers, would smile a lot. And if smiling is very infectious, and it's a great way to just welcome people and make people feel comfortable and at home. And so receiving people with a cheerful countenance from Shammai is a nice thing. Sometimes if you make a friendly joke, not a mean one, you can lighten a tense moment in an argument. You know, if you're clever enough to pause and say, oh, is there, maybe I put this in a funny way and whatever, but not a mean joke. You know, and this is another important thing which I realized about jokes, I guess many years ago. Sadly, you know, what makes something funny? Partly what makes something funny is that the two people, the person telling the story and the person hearing the story, both know a secret truth or some kind of a less known truth. And you say something in a way that kind of triggers that idea about this truth. And the other person recognizes the truth that's being hinted at, and that's what makes it funny. You know, Jewish jokes are all about, or not all about, but many of them are about sort of personality quirks that we perceive as being sort of Jewish. So I'll tell you, I'll give you an example, right? This is a terrible example, but I'll give you the example anyway. So there's a woman who goes to the beach with her little boy, and they're playing in the sand, and all of a sudden a big wave comes, maybe you've heard the story, a big wave comes up and snatches her son, and he's carried off into the water, and she's freaking out, and she prays to God, you know, please save my child, you know, she's distressed. And all of a sudden another big wave comes up, and he's in the wave and dumps him back on the shore. And she looks at her boy, and she brings him and she holds him in her arms. And then she looks up in the heavens and she says, he had a hat. Right? So what makes that funny, right? The idea that, you know, we're not satisfied. We're never satisfied, right? We always want, as a tremendous miracle happens, but we're still looking for something more. Not always the best personality trait, but anyway, that's what makes the thing funny, is that you recognize that personal characteristic or something. Unfortunately, many jokes depend on this secret knowledge, or this shared idea is something not so nice about another group of people. And that's, you know, sadly, a lot of humor sometimes is based on that. It's making fun of somebody else. And so obviously that doesn't help public discourse at all when you're making fun of somebody else for something. So, you know, when Jewish jokes are told, we're making fun of ourselves. At least it's you know, and in a kind of a way, it's kind of saying we should be better than this, right? So in any case, but so try and make a joke that's not mean, right? A joke that'll lighten the moment, but is not intended to really poke at the other person. Okay, the next one is judge everyone with the scale tipped in their favor. This is another statement from Avot. This is kind of a similar idea has entered popular wisdom as well. Things like don't judge another person until you've walked in their shoes. Give everybody the benefit of the doubt, right? That's the idea. So one way, you know, when we talk about how to bridge the divide, one of a number of groups who are trying to find ways for us to learn how to talk to each other again about politics is to start with a question, right? Rather than saying, boy, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Where did you hear such nonsense? Is to ask a question instead. To say, wow, that's an interesting perspective. How did you come to understand that? Where did you learn this? You know what? And then say, oh, that's an interesting source. How do you know that they're being honest with you? I'm not so practiced at this, but the idea is to ask questions rather than slap them in the face with arguments, right? And just kind of probe and try and find out, you know, what I just saw a news report on TV, for instance, a New York Times reporter had captured audio recordings of people in the QAnon and other kind of these conspiracy theory chat rooms. And what they do is they say that one person will say, gee, I just heard this whacked out idea, or I just read this nut job thing. Of course, they don't describe it that way, but it is something that's, you know, like Jewish lasers from outer space causing the California fires or something like that, right? I just read that in a place. Has anybody else here read that? And of course, if you're in a chat room where everybody's looking at the same goofy, outrageous sources for information, somebody else will confirm it. Yeah, I read that too. Isn't that funny? And then they've confirmed it for each other. Now they're sure that there's Jewish lasers from outer space causing California fires. You know, so if you come across somebody like that, it's like, well, where did you read that? You know, was it a source that actually knew what they were talking about? And you know, maybe ask, you know, how do you think the Jews got a laser in outer space? Which Jews paid for this? You know, I mean, just kind of help them think through the logic of it. And again, I'm not necessarily an expert, but rather than call them crazy and insane and yell, which may be the first tendency you have, like, how can you believe such an idiotic thing? To ask, you know, a question like, well, let's think about this. Conspiracy theories, particularly, one of the things you can ask is, how many people need to be involved in this conspiracy for it to work? And once you get into the hundreds or thousands of people, I mean, if the deep state includes everybody in the Justice Department, they're all in on this deal, right? None of them are leaking to the press that there's a conspiracy going on. So maybe there isn't a conspiracy, because how can you keep something like that with thousands of people, secret among thousands of people, and none of them are going to go to the media and say this is happening, right? Anyway, but try and judge everybody with scale to their favor. There's reasons why they might think this, and sort of try and explore how they came to their conclusions, where they learned this from. Very important. Don't hate your sibling in your heart. And boy, is this tough again in some areas of our world today. But you know, just because people have some unusual beliefs, we don't have to hate them. We have to find a way to recognize their humanity. You know, I'll tell you another story. If you read, and there's a number of these books out on the market now, people who were in cult groups, like the woman who was in the Westboro Baptist Church. I don't know if you've heard of them. You can Google them later if you want. Westboro Baptist Church is not really a Baptist church. It's a hate cult. And they are racist and anti-Semitic, and they're really nasty people. They came to Houston early in my rabbinate. It might have been 15 years ago, and they demonstrated. A few of them, a handful of them, came to Beth Yeshurun. They know where the Jewish synagogues are in town. we already had a gate up around our facility. It was after 9/11. That's when we put the gate up. So they were standing outside the fence and yelling at us. And there's only like a couple people of us standing outside the building. I don't know. They're just, holding signs and yelling to nobody mostly. But I happened to be coming out of the building at the time. I came out of the building when this woman on the other side of the fence said, "Your rabbi is a whore and whatever." And I said, "Oh, thanks." And I said, "Oh, thanks." I mean, they were pretty harmless. They're crazy, but I think relatively harmless. And it certainly wasn't worth engaging in her about my character. Anyway, I don't remember why I mentioned that, but oh yeah, people who come out of these cults. So a woman who was in the Westboro Baptist Church left this cult and then wrote a book about it. And other people have left, the Ku Klux Klan. There's a person who left the Ku Klux Klan. There's another one who left another white supremacist organization. And they almost all the stories are the same. How did they find their way back to reality? Somebody actually showed them kindness. A lot of these people end up in these cults because they feel disconnected. Everybody hates them. And then they find a group of like-minded people that, feel like everybody hates them. And so let's all hate those people. So if you are, and this again, I'm not necessarily I don't know how I do it myself, but there's stories I've told, like a group of Hillel students once invited a member of one of these hate groups to their place for Shabbat dinner. And they'd invite him regularly, and they knew who he was and he knew who they were. But he came to the Shabbat dinners and he just saw them interacting as normal people and having a regular conversation. And over time, he came to realize that all these crazy ideas he had about Jews were just wrong. Again, this is not it's not like a DC comic story or a Marvel comic story where we can get a helicopter to spray magic dust over everybody and they'll suddenly wake up and become normal again. But one at a time, if you make it a project, and I'm not suggesting anybody here necessarily do that, but this is kind of how it's done, you kind of sort of bring people back into reality gently with care and concern. And like a lot of these statements that I'm suggesting here from Jewish tradition suggest doing that. That's the best way to kill this thing. But again, it's very hard for some of us who tend to get very emotional about things. So don't hate your sibling in your heart. And but we're all related. By the way, here's my comment. We're all siblings, right? We're all descendants of Adam and Eve. So now I have to tell you another story. This one, number 8, one of my favorite stories in the Talmud, because it involves a woman, first of all. And unfortunately, not too many women are written about in the Talmud. It was a patriarchal world. I can't change history. But there were a few women who are notably mentioned in the Talmud. And one of them is the wife of a famous rabbi, Rabbi Meir. His wife's name was Bruria. And the stories in the Talmud, just to give you an example, people would maybe come to Rabbi Meir, they'd come to his house to ask him a question about Jewish law. And if he wasn't at home, but she was, and she answered the door, they'd ask her, right? So in other words, the Talmud is telling you that she was a scholar in her own right and that her opinions were well respected. And in many cases, she is considered very, very wise. What time is it? Okay, I'll tell you another story about her just for the heck of it. It has nothing to do with our topic, but it just kind of indicates who she is, and a tragic story. So they had 2 kids. And this is a really sad story. I don't know why I'm telling you. Anyway, they had 2 kids, and he went to synagogue Saturday afternoon to finish the Sabbath. He went for Mincha Mariv. He was away from home, and he was doing Havdalah at the synagogue. And while he was away, their 2 kids had died. The Talmud doesn't explain why. And so he comes home and he's kind of in a happy mood. And his wife is obviously depressed and distraught. But she needs to find a way to tell her husband what happened. So she says to her husband, you know, a very kind and wealthy man a few years ago brought us 2 precious gemstones. And I really cherish those gemstones. But today he came back to collect them, and I had to give them back to him. He asked to have them back. Should I give them to him? And he says, of course, they're his gemstones. You have to give them back. So then she kind of takes him into the room where the children are, right? And she's trying to explain that, you know, God gave them these precious gems, and now God took them away. Now, it's a kind of a tragic story, but again, this sort of, I've told it not because of the tragedy of it, but to explain how amazingly wise she was. So now I can tell you the story I want to tell you. So, so there's another case where Rabbi Meir it says in the Talmud, he was being troubled by some people. The Talmud often uses euphemisms. They understate, right? There must have been something more than just trouble, because the next thing the Talmud says is that Rabbi Meir in his morning prayers there's a certain portion of the prayers where you make supplications to God, and he was praying for their death. Right? So you don't pray for somebody's death if they're just making jokes about you. So something was going on, pretty serious, and he was praying that they should die. His wife Beria overheard him one day, and she said, Rabbi Meir, how can you pray for somebody's death? That's horrible. They're human beings. What gives you permission to pray for somebody else's death? And then this is to show her wisdom. She says, and if you're relying on this verse from the book of Psalms, where it says the wicked people shall be no more. I forget which verse it is exactly. She said, you're mistranslating the verse. You're misunderstanding the verse. It's not referring to wicked people. It's referring to wicked deeds, wicked actions, wickedness, right? You should be praying that wickedness should end, not wicked people. And so pray that they repent and change their ways. So according to the story in the Talmud, he did, and they changed their ways, and everybody lived happily ever after. So I love the story because it's about Beria, and it also is an important lesson I think we can learn that rather than pray that somebody should suffer some horrible punishment for their crazy beliefs, maybe we should pray that they should come to be enlightened. Okay. Number 9 is a kind of a long one. And it's how to argue. And it's taken from a passage in the Talmud. Here's the tractate over here. It's from this page in the Talmud down here, Eruvin 13b, where it tells an interesting story. So in the Jewish world, in the first century or two, there was a Supreme Court, like a body of the top rabbis. And you had to be admitted to the Supreme Court and so on to be able to vote on big cases. So they did have a system where easy cases could be decided by one rabbi or a panel of 3 rabbis or whatever. But if it was a difficult case, it went to the Supreme Court. And if it was a capital offense, in other words, the punishment was death, it had to go to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court at the time was called the Sanhedrin. But the Sanhedrin was also kind of a legislative body. They would pass rules. They'd argue about laws, how to apply the rules from the Torah, and then they would vote on them. And whatever the majority was, that was the way the law would run. And just like today, the Sanhedrin had 2 major political parties, right? They weren't Democrats and Republicans. They were from the school of Hillel and the school of Shammai. And again, Hillel was the more liberal, open-minded interpreter. Shammai was the more strict constructionist school of thinking. Hillel had the more popular view. And so he had more votes in the Sanhedrin. And so in almost every case where it went to a vote, the view of Hillel prevailed. There's a handful of cases somewhere else in the Talmud it talks about where it lists the cases where Shammai won. But basically, every time it came to a vote, Hillel won. So in this particular passage in the Talmud, it asks the question, why did the law always follow Hillel? And assuming that there was some divine element to this, what was it that that gave Hillel the advantage over Shammai in these debates? So a voice from heaven, this is the divine element, right? A voice from heaven is going to answer the question. It's called a bat kol. By the way, I don't necessarily suggest that there was a bat kol. I'm just saying the rabbis are phrasing it in terms that they felt that God sort of approved of the idea that Hillel got the majority vote. So the bat kol says, guess what? Both views are the words of God, right? Hillel and Shammai both are reflecting aspects of what God intended, right? And again, this goes to the Jewish idea that there's more than one way to look at something. And so it's acknowledging that both views have merit. Both views have some truth to them, right? And this is an important thing, as I write in the blue. There's some truth to the other perspective, and you have to, and if you admit that up front, it's like you're hearing that. This is another thing you have to do in an argument. You have to really hear the other person and hear what it is they're saying, reflect it back to them. This is what I hear you saying, and I understand that. There's a certain kind of sense, if you can say this sincerely, there's a certain kind of sense to what you're saying because I feel same way, X, Y, Z. So admit that truth up front. Both are the words of God, but the law was in accordance with the view of Hillel. The black is from the direct quote. The blue is my insertion, right? So the law is in accordance with the view of the school of Hillel. Why, the Talmud asks, if both views are the words of God, should the school of Hillel prevail in establishing the law? The answer was A, they were kind, right? So when you're arguing, you have to be nice. Don't be nasty. Don't do name calling. By the way, I did, I studied debate in high school and so on, and many of you probably studied the fallacies of reasoning and arguments, right? And one thing that's coming out a lot now is sort of what's called the ad hominem attack. If you can't attack what the person is saying directly, you attack the messenger, right? Oh, but this person is really a disgusting person. I don't like him because of blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? Sometimes even people who are wrong 90% of the time can be right 10% of the time. So an ad hominem attack, attacking the person, doesn't really say anything necessarily about what they're saying. Just because they're crazy about 15 other things doesn't mean that this particular thing they're saying isn't true. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And don't be nasty or resort to name calling. Okay, so they were kind. Second thing, they were modest. Humility is a worthy trait in a debate. Be open to listening to the other side, accepting that you may not have all of the truth, right? Again, this is not easy to do, but not to get so engaged, worked up, whatever, to take a step back, relax, be modest and calm. Number 3, they studied both their own position. That is, you need to know the facts and arguments that support your position. And they studied the position of the school of Shammai. So you need to know the facts and arguments that your opponents use so that you can answer them, right? This is about a debate, not about humiliating somebody. So you have to know what their arguments are in order to find a way to effectively answer them. And they always cited the opposing view first. And again, that's all psychologists say this. Before you say your point of view, you reflect back to the person you're talking to what you heard them say, right? So first of all, you're making sure you heard them correctly. Secondly, you're validating that you heard them. You understand what they're saying, right? So cite their view first, and then explain why you disagree. An argument should be an attempt to persuade others to your point of view, not to stoke the fire of those who already agree with you, right? To get them angry at the other people, or to vent your anger and frustration on the other people. And then I said, this is very hard to remember and apply. But, hopefully we'll all get a little bit better at it. The more we can try and do these things, I think the more we can try and cool the fires that are burning really in our society today. So, and then last of all is from a sort of a commentary on a vote. The other ones were from, some of the other ones were from a vote. This is a sort of commentary on a vote called the Vote de Rabbi Natan. And so this is a fascinating thing also. If you have done someone minor wrong, you've done something that you think is not so, it's kind of trivial, but you upset somebody, but you didn't think it was a big deal, but you did it wrong. It was something wrong. You should consider that it was a big deal and make a huge apology, even for a minor thing. Go out of your way to be effusive about how badly you feel. Well, if you have done something, a great benefit, you've done something really wonderful for somebody, you did somebody a huge favor or gave them a large amount of money or whatever, don't think of it like a big deal. Think of it as a minor thing. You really, it was just a thing you did. And don't expect, as I write here, a big thank you, right? Because then you're likely to get very disappointed when you don't get one. Right? So don't expect, anything. It's something you did. You did it because it was the right thing to do. But don't, you think, you may feel like it was a big deal to you, but don't necessarily think of it, expect anything for it. On the other hand, if someone has done you a minor favor, they loaned you a couple bucks to get Starbucks coffee or something, consider it a huge thing and give them a huge thank you, right? Go out of your way to be very effusive in your thanks. Whereas if somebody has done something really bad to you and you feel that it was horrible that they did this, try, and not easy, but try to minimize that. And try not to bear a grudge and accept an apology if offered, but don't expect one. So why does Vote de Rabbi Natan say this? We all have a tendency to overrate or underrate an event to suit our own self-centered position, right? So to us, we may feel like we went way out of our way to do something for somebody else, but in the end, maybe that's just how we look at it. Maybe it was not such a big thing, at least objectively, or certainly in the other person's perspective. And if somebody slights you in some way and you want to blow it up into this big thing, that may not be how they saw it. They might have thought it was just a minor thing. So we need to sort of self-correct. We tend to see things from our own perspective a lot. And this is one way to try and be more objective about what really happened. It's wise to try and counterbalance the tendency of our own thing and suggest, as suggested in this wise adage from our tradition. So those are the 10 commandments of civility. This paper that I wrote, and I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes on this and then talk about the other handouts, sort of talks about arguing and reviews that principle I just discussed about how to win an argument. It talks about Lashon Hara, the evil tongue. And in Judaism, there are other handouts that relate more directly to this. Saying bad things about somebody else is wrong in Judaism. And it's unlike American law, even if it's true, even if what you're saying about the other person is true, you're still not supposed to say it. If it's going to cause people to hate somebody or dislike somebody. Defamatory stuff is not, you're not supposed to, there's no reason for you to spread on defamatory stuff about somebody else, even if it's true. Now, there is an exception to that, obviously. If you can prevent a crime or prevent somebody else from being hurt, right? So if you know that somebody is a thief and they stole money from their last employer, and then your friend comes to you and says, hey, I'm thinking about employing this guy, what do you think? Right? Then you probably have an obligation to tell them, well, I don't know what he's like now, but he has stolen from somebody in the past, and you should be aware of that if you hire him. So in a case where somebody needs to know, like somebody's going to date somebody, and you happen to know that they mistreated the last significant other, whatever, right? So maybe you have an obligation to say, well, look, I just want you to be aware of this. So every relationship is different. I don't know what the causes were, but I do happen to know this particular thing, and so you should be aware that that was something that happened. So in cases where somebody actually needs to know, there's an exception to the rule, but generally, you're not allowed to even spread true things about somebody else if they present somebody in a bad light. Arguing, we talked about don't bear a grudge, right? We have an obligation to seek somebody's forgiveness if we've upset somebody, but if we've tried to get their forgiveness 3 times in a row and they still don't forgive us, then they are violating a separate law, which is don't bear a grudge. Reproving somebody, this this is an important one. So if you see somebody doing something wrong, you are supposed to try and correct them. But the trick is, again, not to vent your anger. Like, how could you be so stupid to think that it's okay to do this, right? You can't, that's not how you reprove somebody. You're supposed to do it in a way that will actually get them to change their behavior, right? So yelling at them is not likely to change their behavior. So somehow you need to, again, calm down, try and think rationally, put yourself in their shoes, figure out what might be going on, and explain to them why what they're doing is really wrong, right? In a way that will say, look, I understand your situation, but you really should not be doing this. This is a wrong thing to do. So you have a responsibility to try and tell somebody when they're doing something wrong. You know, one of the things they talk about in Holocaust teaching, and this applies not just to the Holocaust, but other cases, is, you know, there was only a small percentage of people in Germany who were actively, you know, doing Nazi things. But then there was a large percentage of people who let it happen. They didn't do anything to stop it. And they call that the bystander. You know, you're a bystander and you don't stop it. So if you see somebody or hear somebody saying something racist or doing something that's wrong in some way, we have a responsibility to try and say something about that. But you have to do it in a way that gets them to understand why what they said was really racist and why it's wrong. Because your object is to try and get them to change how they think, not to, you know, because just embarrassing them, shaming them, humiliating them, or yelling at them, in the end won't accomplish anything. I mean, it may only reinforce their idea that they're right. So it's tricky. The rabbis also say, when they talked about this obligation, they said, nobody in our day knows how to reprove somebody appropriately. Nobody knows how to talk to somebody appropriately to correct them. And nobody in our day knows how to accept reproach when they get it, right? And that's something I also have, you know, everybody has difficulty getting criticism. Sometimes you have to listen to criticism. But, you know, apparently some things never change. It was not always easy. Here's some additional reading and then some other stuff. And then I have, just in the last few minutes here, 2 sermons. Again, I hate to give you my writing, but I felt like I kind of summarized the material well. So this is a sermon I gave many years ago on love your neighbor as yourself. And in a typical Jewish fashion, you know, one of the things that's asked in Jewish sources is what constitutes your neighbor? And I give in my sermon here 4 different definitions of who is your neighbor that you have to love and what that means for how our relationships are supposed to be. And then some advice from a guy named Zelig Pliskin, who's written a lot about how to be a moral, ethical person. You can Google his name, probably in Amazon. Well, go to Amazon. You can look up books that he's written on Jewish values. And he's Orthodox, but he expresses a lot of, I think, some common wisdom. And here's a little more from Pliskin. Okay, so that was that sermon. This one is about gossip and slander, and this is where I kind of summarized Jewish law about gossip and slander. And this is, if you're only going to read one thing on that subject, again, I hate to tout my own stuff, but read this one. And if you want a more detailed Orthodox perspective, which is extremely detailed about how complicated the laws of gossip and slander are, I gave you 2 long articles from the internet from an Orthodox source. So Lashon Hara is slander, Like the Lashon Hara literally means the evil tongue, right? So that's using your tongue to spread evil about people. And the other topic, which is related in Jewish tradition, is that's all material on Lashon Hara. Here's the other source. Here we go. Rechilut. Rechilut is tale-bearing, right? So that's spreading rumors about people. And again, very, very detailed Orthodox perspective about the rules of that. So that's kind of the material for today. Any questions? All right, so hopefully that's some insights to helping deal with a very complicated topic that we're dealing with today that's gotten much worse in the 25 years since I wrote my paper on this subject. All right, anyways, take care, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
See you next week.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day, Stephen.
Okay, take care.
Boker Tov.
Boker Tov.
Ma nishma? Ma nishma tov? Hakol
Yeah.
Oh, kacha kacha. Tov? Oh, kacha kacha.
Tov.
Kacha kacha tov. Hayom yafeh me'od. Hayom yafeh me'od. Have you looked outside how beautiful it is?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, here we go. We had just started, well, we had started the Pet chapter, chapter 11, about pets. We had done quite a bit of it, but not all of it. How about if we do our Aleph Bet song? Come back. Okay, so Aleph Bet song is on 95. Here we go. Aleph Bet Bet.
Aleph, bet, bet, bet.
Gimel Dalet Hey.
Gimel Dalet Hey.
Vav Zayin Chet Tet.
Vav Zayin Het Tet.
Yud Kaf Chaf.
Yud Kaf Kaf.
Lamed Mem Nun.
Lamed Mem Nun.
Samech Ayin Pei Fei.
Samech Ayin Pei Fei.
Sadi Kuf.
Kufresh. Sadi Kufresh.
Shin Sin Tav.
Shin Sin Tav.
Okay. Now I'm trying to remember if we had any other Sophete forms, final forms of consonants. Which one did we have? We definitely had Nun and Nun Sophete, right?
Yes.
Did we have any others yet? Did we have Mem and Mem Sophete?
No.
No, we haven't done that yet. Okay, so let's just go through the Aleph Bet chart. That was all for my husband. Let's go through the Aleph Bet chart together and identify the final form. So Aleph, Bet, Vet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yud, Kav, chaf, and then it's chaf sofit. That is what a chaf looks like at the end of a word. Chaf sofit. So if you could, I don't know if you can do this or not, but if you're able to visualize in your mind the word baruch, which is, greatest hits of prayer book words is Baruch, right? There's no more common word in the prayer book, I think, probably, than Baruch, blessed. And Baruch ends with the Chaf Sofit, and that is it, Chaf Sofit. Okay, continuing. Lamed, Mem, Sofit. So Mem Sofit looks kind of like a square, right? And it looks a lot like the Samech, except that it is a square. And then Nun Sofit, Samech, Ayin, Pei. I always say that Pei and Fei look like sort of like elephants. To me, it's like an elephant's tusk. I mean, a trunk. And then after Fei is Fei Sofit. Sadi Sofit, right? And Sadi Sofit looks kind of like a capital Y. Kuf Re Shin Sin Tav Tav. Okay, I am just wondering if there's anyone who thinks with or without the song they can do the Aleph Bet on their own, but stop to fill in the Sofits. In other words, Aleph Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yud, Chaf, Sofit, Lamed, Mem, Sofit, Nun, Sofit, Samech, Ayin, Pei, Fei, Sofit, Tzadi, Sofit, Kuf, Re, Shin, Sin, Tav, Tav. Not fast like that, but are there people in the class who feel like they could do that? I guess that means no.
I can try.
Oh, okay. Kol hakavod. Please try.
Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav,
Zayin.
Zion, Tough? No, Hey.
Zav, Zayin. Tet.
Tet. Yud, Kaf, Sofit, Lamed, Mem, Sofit, Nun, Sofit,
Samech, Ayin,
Samech. What is that one after the Nun Sofit?
Samech, Ayin,
Samet.
Pei. Right.
Oh, yes. Samet, Ayin, Fei Sofit,
Good.
Sari, Jude, Kuf, Resh, Shin, Sin, Tav.
Yes, it was very, very good. After the Tzadi, there's a letter that looks like a big Y, and that is a Tzadi Sofit.
Sari Sofit.
Let's try this. I'm going to read 3 letters, and then you read the next 3 letters, okay? Can everybody do this? And don't worry about making mistakes. Just give it a shot. If people wouldn't mind unmuting and just doing this exercise, you can do it very quietly. You can whisper, but try to participate. All right, I'm going to do 3, and then I'm going to ask you to do the next 3. Aleph, Bet, Vet.
Aleph, Bet,
Dalet, Hey.
Gimel, Dalet, Hey.
Vav, Zayin, Chet.
Vav, Zayin, Het.
Chaf, Sofit, Lamed.
Vav, Chaf Sofit, Lamed.
Nun Sofit, Samech, Ayin.
Pei,
Pei
Sofit.
Sofit.
Tzadi Sofit, Kuf.
Resh, Shin, Sin, Tav.
Tav. Okay, let's
Tav,
try
Tav.
that just one more time. Aleph, Bet,
Gimel, Dalet,
Dalet, Hey.
Vav, Zayin, Chet.
Tet, Yud,
Chaf, Sofit, Lamed.
Mem,
Sofit, Nun.
Nun Sofit, Samech, Ayin.
Pay.
Pay Sofit.
Sari Sofit, Kuf,
Resh.
Shin. Sin.
Tav.
Tav,
Now
tav.
you guys start with Aleph, Bet, Vet. Just do 3 and I'll do the next 3.
Aleph, Bet, Bet,
Bet.
Gimel, Dalet, Hey,
Bab.
Bab,
Zion.
Zayin, Het,
Het, Yud, Kaf,
Kaf.
Av,
Kaf Sofit. Lamed.
Mem Sofit, Nun,
Nun Sofit. Samed. Ayin.
Ayin,
Hey, Fe Sofit,
Sari,
Sari
Sofit,
Sofit. Kuf.
Kuf,
Resh, Shin, Sin.
Tav, Tav.
Okay, so this might make your brain hurt a little bit, but it's not bad for your brain to hurt a little bit because that means you're learning, right? So if your brain hurts, say, yay, I'm learning, my brain. Okay,
Diane, did you
Yes.
say that Sofit comes at the end of a word?
yes. So feet looks different from a regular letter, but it's really the same letter, but at the end of a word. So it's calligraphy, right? It's the calligraphy of the letter. Now, I am going to, just so that we practice our letter recognition, do something that you'll really, really probably hate, which is I'm going to do columns now. So I'm going to do the Aleph column. I'll do 2, you do 2, I do 2, etc. Okay? Starting with the Aleph column. Aleph, Hey,
Yud.
Yud, Mem, Ayin,
Ayin, Sadi Sofit.
Tav.
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 Okay. Now you start on the Bet column, first 2.
Bet.
Bab.
Tav, Mem Sofit,
Pay. Kuf.
Tav. Okay, I'll start on the next column. Vet, Zion,
Bab.
Nun,
Fei,
Fei.
Resh. And now your turn.
Gimel.
Gimel.
Gimel, Het,
Pay.
Nun, Sofit.
Oh no, it's Gimel Chet. Gimel Chet, that was you. And now it's my turn. Chaf Sofit, Nun Sofit.
Hey.
Pay.
Pei,
Sofit.
Sofit, Shin.
Good. Dalid, Tet,
Lamed.
Lamed, Mem, Sameh.
Sadi, Sin. So
Tav.
did that, oh, right, and then we already did Tub. So that was a kind of a different way of looking at the alphabet, right? We didn't do it in order. Your brain to look at it out of order. Okay, let's just review on page 96 our vowels. So I'm going to say the name of the vowel and you say the sound of the vowel, okay? You see the 2 columns, name and symbol? I'm going to say the name, you say the sound. I'd like you to try to look at the symbols. Kamatz, Hatach, Shva, is correct. Chataf, Patach, Chirik.
E.
Yeah, now I don't think we did the next ones yet. Did we do the O vowel yet? I don't think we have we? No, I don't think so. Okay, so that's as far as we've gotten with the vowels. All right. Okay, let's go to page 44, line 4.
Page what?
44,
44, okay.
line 4. And I'm going to read the line twice, and then you'll read it with me, okay? Chika, shachach, chaviv, chaval, chatan, lakach. Chika, Shachach, Chaviv, Chaval, Chatan, Lakach. This time, try reading it with me. Chika, Shachach,
Chaviv,
Chaval, Chatan, Lakach. Good. Next line. I'll do it twice and then you'll do it just after me. Chala, Chalil, Bitzachak, Achat, Chatzir, Chanan. Chala, Chalil, Bitzachak, Achat, Chatzir, Chanan. Okay, here we go together. Chala, Chalil, Bitzachak, Achat, Chatzir, Chanan.
Hanan,
Good. Line 6. Mincha,
Min,
Chamisha,
Na,
Shalcha, Chiri,
Yeri,
Bacharta. Mincha, Chamisha, Shalcha, Chiri,
Rik,
Bacharta. And now with me, Mincha,
Mishnah,
Chamisha, Shalcha,
Hirik,
Chiri, Bacharta.
Bacharta.
Feel free to write in little cheat sheet notes if you need to get through this, okay? Line 7. Rachaman, Ha-Rachaman, Shacharit, Chatima, Chadasha. Rachaman, Ha-Rachaman, Shacharit, Chatima, Chadasha. And now line 7 with me. Rachaman,
Haman,
Ha-Rachaman,
Shacharit,
Chatima,
Tima,
Chadasha.
Hadasha.
Good. Line 8. Ha-Chala, Ha-Bracha, Chala, Leshabbat, Ha-Rachaman. Ha-Chala, Ha-Bracha, Chala, Leshabbat, Ha-Rachaman. Okay, this time with me. Ha-Chala,
Ha-Hala,
Ha-Bracha,
Ha-Bracha,
Chala,
Kala,
Leshabbat,
Shabbat,
Ha-Rachaman.
Karahaman.
Okay, did you find the words Chala and Ha-Rachaman?
Yes.
Okay, I see Chala on line 5, and I see Ha-Chala, the Chala, Ha-Chala, and Chala on line 8. What about Rachaman? Oh, there it is, line 7. We have Rachaman, right. And right, we have Ha-Rachaman. Ha-Rachaman's the merciful one, and Rachaman by itself is just merciful. And what is the word for blessing? Who remembers what that word is?
Bracha.
Bracha. So we did have bracha. Where is that? I've never seen. Oh, we have Ha-Bracha on line 8.
Ha-Bracha.
Right, the blessing.
The blessing. Habraha.
Okay, page 45. Watch out for look-alike letters as you read each line. Okay, I'm going to read line one once, and then you'll do it just after me, okay? Ha, chi, hi, ha, ta, ti, ta. Again with me. Ha,
He,
hi, ha, ta, ti, ha. Okay, line 2. E, lot, ma, ka. He, ba, ba. With me. Ha, e, lot, ma, ka. He, ba, ba. Line 3. Ta, cut. Ra, ta. Ha, heel. Ha. Sorry, I made a mistake. Ha. Okay, line 3 again. Ha, cut. Ra, ta. Ha, heel. Ha. Is there anyone who would like to read line 3 for us?
I'll do it.
Okay, great. Give it a shot.
Line 3, correct?
Line 3.
Okay. Ha, rata, ha. Oh, sorry. Heel. Ha.
Ooh, that was, and I liked your head. That was good.
Thank you.
Okay, very nice. All right. Let's jump to line 5. I'll read it twice and then you'll read it with me. Ahavat lehatchil shacharit chava berit. Okay, let's go back and do it again. Ahavat lehatchil shacharit chava berit. Mitsuyan. Does anybody remember what berit means? I think we mentioned covenant. Mitsuyan, a covenant, which is like an agreement. Okay, page 40. Okay, now last week I had actually given us a little voluntary homework assignment on page 47. I don't know if anybody did that.
40 what?
But we're going to start at 46. And 46 is the letter Yud. Yud, which is just like a Y in Yud. Word that they give us is Aliyah. And so Aliyah has kind of multiple layers of meaning. Can anybody tell me anything about the word Aliyah? Does anybody know anything about that word?
It's going up. Going to is to say that one of the blessings of the reading of the Torah.
Yes. So when you are given the honor of going up to the Torah to say the Torah blessing, that is frequently called an aliyah. Oh, I have the third aliyah. That means I'm going up to say the blessing before and after the third reading. An aliyah is often used to describe the actual divisions in the Torah reading. The Torah reading on Shabbat is divided into 7 parts, and then the end of the 7th part is done again as what we call the maftir. So that's an 8th section. Each of those sections is often referred to as an aliyah. That just kind of the meaning of aliyah kind of expanded to mean that too. So if you were going to chant one of the 8 Torah readings on Shabbat, you might say, oh, I have the 3rd aliyah. I'm chanting the 3rd aliyah. But can mean the person called up to say, or it can mean the blessings before and after a reading, or it could actually refer to the reading itself, right? I'm going to call you up to say the 3rd aliyah blessing, or I'm going to call you up to chant the 3rd aliyah being the 3rd Torah reading. So aliyah could also mean a Torah reading. The blessing or the reading, so it's kind of a contextual thing to know the difference. What does it mean, like in American Jewish parlance, we say somebody is making aliyah. What do we say making?
Moving to Israel.
Moving to Israel, because there's this idea spiritually we are going up to Israel, right? And in
Right.
some ways, it's about the city of Jerusalem, which has had fairly high elevation. So you're saying you're going up to Jerusalem. So, but anyway, aliyah, making aliyah is the idea of spiritually going up to Israel. When we move to Israel, we're making aliyah, right? It doesn't mean a visit. It doesn't mean a visit. It means when you're going to live in Israel, making aliyah. There's also Israelis who leave Israel to live somewhere else are said to go down from Israel, yored, go down, yored, as opposed to going up. Okay. Anyway, now the yud, we said, functions like a Y in English, which means sometimes it's like a consonant and sometimes it's like a vowel. Let's jump to line 1 on 46. I'm going to read it once and then you can read it with me. Ya, ya, ye, yeah, ya. Now read it with me.
Yeah, Jim. Yeah.
Can somebody explain the syllable with 2 yuds? What's going on there?
Is it silent?
Well, the second yud is sort of silent, but why are there 2 yuds? Why is the second yud there?
Isn't it sort of like an I sound, like wine-bound, for example? Wouldn't it have? No, maybe not.
You're definitely like very close to what I was looking for.
It's more like, I don't know if it has to do with Yiddish. It's also used a lot in like certain Yiddish, like W, like wa. It's like you have 2 vava.
Yeah,
and then
that's
certain
more,
sounds. I don't
that
know.
would be more the vav, but you are going in the direction, because the second yud has the it suggests a vowel sound. It suggests the E. So even if we have the dot, the chirik, if we had something without the chirik, might guess that the vowel is E. It has that kind of quality, that E, right? The yud, when you say the E vowel, your mouth is set up to say a Y. If you think about the word yellow, what you're really saying when you say the word yellow is you're saying yellow, yellow, yellow. Right. So the E, the yud at the end of a vowel indicates an E. The yud at the end of a vowel indicates an E. So we have some blended vowels that we're going to look at later where it's I, or ooey, or oi, right? Where they're actually, or even the vowel A, right? So the yud just does imply the E sounds. It does. So you were right. Okay. let's take a look at line 2. I'll read it and then you read it after me. They are hoping that we will get confused and mix up a yud and a vav, but we won't. Ya, va, ye, ve, ye, vi. Now with me. Ya,
Ya,
va,
va,
ye,
ye,
ve,
ve,
ye,
yi,
vi.
bi.
Okay, line 3. Ya, sha,
Yasha,
yin, yeshi, kayi, yidi. I'm going to do that again. You can do it with me this time. Yash,
Yasha,
yar,
Yar,
yeshi,
Yeshi,
kayi,
Hayi,
yidi.
Yedi.
4. I'll do it by myself. Me. Ya, ba, yish, yeka, ya, ha, ya, hi, yal, ya, ba. No, I just guess I'm not hearing anybody doing ya, ba. Let's do it again. Ya, ba,
Jabba,
yish,
Jish, Jish,
yeka,
Yeha,
yaka,
Yaha,
yahi,
Yahi,
yal.
Yal.
Okay, and line 5, I'm going to read line 5 twice and then you'll do it after me. Yeshana.
Yeshana, oops.
That's okay. Yashava. Yashi. Yekara. Ya. Yeshana. Yashva. Yashi. Yekara. Niya. Now just right after me. Yeshana.
Yeshana,
Yashva.
Jasba,
Yashi.
Yashi,
Yikara.
Yikara,
Niya.
Niya.
All right. Now on page 47, let's do the last 3 lines. Now we're doing fine for time. Okay. All right, I'm going to read it twice. Yachtav Yira Yitzchak Yabasha Siyarta. Again, Yachtav Yira Yitzchak Yabasha Siyar. Oh, I did the last one wrong. Siyartai. Right? That's a blended vowel. Okay, I'll read 6 one more time. Yachtav Yira Yitzchak Yabasha Siyartai. It's funny because I don't think they've given us that vowel yet, but they have it here. Okay, so now do it after me. Yachtav
Yachtam,
Yira
Yirak,
Yitzchak
Yitzchak,
Yabasha
Yabasha,
Siyartai. Okay, who is Yitzchak?
Abrahamson.
Isaac. Correct. It's Isaac. Okay, line 7. Aliyah. Right, I'll read it a couple times first. Aliyah, Keviyah, Yivachach, Yalda, Yedi'ah. Again, Aliyah, Keviyah, Yivachach, Yalda, Yedi'ah. Okay, now after me. Aliyah,
Aliyah.
Eviyah,
Yeah.
Yivachach,
Yiva.
Yalda,
Yada.
Yediyah.
Yedia.
Okay, line 8. Yeshiva,
Yeshiva.
Bach, Haita, Minyan,
Minyan.
Aliyah. Again,
Aliyah.
Yeshiva, Yishtabach, Haita, Minyan, Aliyah. Now after me, Yeshiva, Tabach,
Shabbat.
Haita, Minyan, Aliyah. Okay, let's practice that line a couple more times. Yeshiva,
Yeshiva.
Yishtabach,
Ishtabach.
Haita,
Haita.
Minyan,
Minyan.
Aliyah.
Aliyah.
Okay, now the first word, yeshiva, which literally means like sitting, but yeshiva in Ashkenazic Hebrew we say yeshiva. What is a yeshiva?
Hebrew school.
Right,
Not
it's a
Hebrew school, but an Orthodox school.
right, and a yeshiva as opposed to like a beit midrash where would be younger children, right, learning their alphabet and things like that. A yeshiva is where people would study like more advanced kinds of things, like Jewish law. They would study Jewish law, and they would study midrash, you know, stories that help us to understand the traditional interpretation of Torah. So we would study midrash, and we would study Jewish law. And what's very, very nice is there, first of all, now you can go to a yeshiva online if you wanted to, is that there are lots of yeshivot that are not so orthodox that women can't go to them. There are co-ed. First of all, there are yeshivot just for, and there are pluralistic yeshivot that men and women can both study at together. Even among the Orthodox that exists, but particularly for conservative and Reform Jews, there are yeshivot where you could study if you wanted to. There's one that I went to for a few summers that I really enjoyed, just for like a week at a time. There was one called Mechon Hadar in New York. You can find it online, Hadar, where I took some Talmud classes, and it was just really a lot of fun. To go to a yeshiva, even if it was just for a week at a time, it was really enjoyable.
Cantor, I have a question. When people are in mourning, I know it was called sitting Shiva. Are the two words related?
Yes, right. They are related, yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, okay. Although now that I think of it, I have to look at the spelling in Hebrew, because it could come from the root to sit, but it could also come from the root for 7. Now I have to take a look. I'm glad you asked. My spelling isn't always so great. Let me look it up for you, okay?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay. So can people find in the last few lines the word aliyah?
Last word. Aliyah.
Oh, that's the last word on line 8. And the first word on line 7. That's right. And what did we say aliyah means?
Going up.
And?
Moving to Israel.
Moving to Israel and?
Israel.
And the Torah blessing, right? Being called up to do the Torah blessing,
Mhm.
and also the Torah reading, right?
Mhm.
Lots of meanings for that word. But English is like that too. We have lots of words that have multiple meanings. Okay, minyan. Can you find minyan?
Yeah.
Line 8.
Line 8, next to the last word.
Right. And so minyan is the 10 Jewish adults, and of course, if it was Orthodox, it would be men, but the 10 Jewish adults needed for a prayer service. And at Beth Yeshurun, we all use the Ashkenazic pronunciation, so we'll say the museum minyan. Minyan. Minyan is the Hebrew. Okay. All right. And it says, challenge, use the words aliyah and minyan in English sentences. Can somebody use aliyah in a sentence for me?
I am going I'm going to make Aliyah to Israel.
There you go. I'm making aliyah to Israel.
Bezrat Hashem.
Right. Be'ezrat Hashem, with God's help.
That's why Elala, does that have to do also with Elal, the company,
El al. Yes, the
It-
word al is like al.
Mm.
Yes, very good. Very good. Boy, I hadn't thought about that in a long time. That's right. Okay, what about a sentence for minyan or minion?
We cannot start services until more people show up because we don't have enough for a minyan.
Good. We don't have a minion. We can't start services. How many times in real life you're waiting for more people to come? Okay.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Here at the end of the chapter on page 48, we solved the mystery of that blended vowel sound, I. So if you have a kamatz or a patach followed by the letter yud, at the end of a word, we say I, like in shy or pie.
Shy.
Okay. So, for example, Chai, Dai, Sinai, Matai, Bechayai. You want to try to do this for me with me? Chai, Dai, Sinai, Matai, Bechayai. Can you read with me now? Chai,
Die.
Dai, Sinai, Matai, Bechayai. Now, in most, next we're looking at Kamatz Yod Vav. Kamatz Yod Vav. And when you have Kamatz Yod Vav at the end of a word, the Yod is silent. It's a special ending. It's a little bit irregular in terms of pronunciation because the Yod is silent. Now, most of the time, that ending of most of the time means his. I am not sure what it means in the word akshav. Akshav means now. So I don't know what the av ending means in akshav, but most of the time it means his. So devarav would mean his words, or it could even mean his actions. Rachamav, his mercy. And then alav would be about him or on him. And ne'arav, his youth. But I don't know why akshav has that ending. I'm sure there's a reason for it. Anyway, why don't you read these words after me? Devarav,
Devarav.
Rachamav,
Rahama.
Rachamav.
Akshav,
Akshav.
Shav.
Alav,
Alav.
Ne'arav.
Ne'arav.
If you look at the Ashrei prayer, which we are not going to do right now, but the Ashrei prayer, it is full of words that end with this special ending, the Av ending. I can't think of another prayer that has more of this kind of ending collected into one place. Okay, take turns reading these lines. I guess we'll just do them together. I'm going to read 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can just repeat them right after me. E,
E.
Chil,
Hil.
He,
He.
Mia.
Mia.
Line 2. Line 2. Leah, Yada,
Jada.
Yehi, Yadi,
Yaji. Hayi.
Good. Line 3. Yachid,
Yahid.
Yama,
Yama.
Yarda,
Jalda.
Vaihi,
Baihi.
Yitzchak,
Yitzhak.
Vaichal.
Bai.
Good. Line
Bai.
Yachad,
Yahad.
Yatsa,
Sa.
Yatsa.
Ada,
Yada.
Yadit,
Jadit.
Yadid, sorry, Yedi,
Yejid.
Jedid.
Yahir.
Jahir.
Okay.
Here.
So, it's very nice to have these vocabulary lists, but I feel like if we were meeting like multiple times a week, I would try to have you work on some of the vocabulary, but it's an awful lot to do when we're only meeting once a week. However, if any of you are ambitious and want to make vocabulary note cards, you could practice these little collections of vocabulary that they're starting to have in the chapters. I mean, it would be a nice thing to do. So, are there any words here that people are already familiar with? Oh, look on the second line at the end. Here. We know that word here, don't we?
Yes.
Shema.
Shema.
Now, at the end of the first line, I see we have Yarad.
Yarad.
Remember we said Aliyah
Yes.
going up. So Yarad, the noun form, I guess, would be Yerida, going down. Yarad. Yerida. Yarad is verb form, and Yerida is, what's that called? A gerund. Okay. I used to know all of the grammar terms, now I don't remember them anymore. Okay. Oh, on the third line, the third word, yayin. Yayin, wine. That's a good one to know, isn't it? Yayin.
Yeah.
It sounds a lot like the English when you think about it. Yayin and wine. You can see how they're related, the two yuds and a W. Yayin. Okay, and then I don't see any words on the last line that you would have any reason to know that we would have learned yet. Okay, I am going to read the first line and you can just echo me. Ayin, Yarash,
Yarash.
Arash,
Al-Yad,
Hayat,
Yashar,
Yashar,
Yarad.
Yarad,
Line 2. Hayar,
Hayar,
Yemina,
Yemina,
Dayan,
Dayan,
Yad,
Jad,
Shema,
Shema,
Lada'at,
Ladat,
Lehatzbiya,
Lechatzbia,
Yayin,
Jain,
Aval,
Aval,
Madricha,
Madriha,
Niyar, Sha'al,
Al,
Medina,
Medina,
Sha'a,
Sha'a,
Hadash.
Hadash.
Okay, so they record our class every week. I have never gone online to see what the recordings are like. I'll probably be very embarrassed if I did. However, if you want to practice your reading, it's not a bad idea to go back to the class recording. You can always fast forward through any of the discussion parts that you're not interested in. And it just will help reinforce your reading to practice with the recording. And if you did that a few times a week, you'd probably be in fantastic shape. So if you were going to do one thing, I would practice this Aleph Bet page. Practice being able to go in all sorts of different directions. Like you could do Aleph Bet, and then I can't do this upside down. Hey, Vav, right? Or Vet Gimel, and then Zion Chet. You could do all sorts of different patterns, different ways of practicing, or you could do the columns that we did, or you could practice going backwards from Tav and then going backwards. If you practice reading the letters out of order, it forces your brain to make different kinds of connections so that you don't always have to go, oh, let's see, it's Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. You'll get faster at identifying the Aleph, Bet. So I would recommend doing that if you have any time to spare. And just remember, when you start that kind of anxious feeling, that actually means that you're learning. So for that, if it feels too easy, you're not challenging yourself quite enough. Okay, you have to be just uncomfortable to know that you're learning. All right. Have a wonderful week. I'll see you next week, right?
Right. What's homework?
Oh, homework. Practice doing this in different orders. Like try jumping around in different ways, okay?
Okay.
If you feel like you've reached the challenge and you can really do this page, let me know, because I'd enjoy hearing you do it next week. Okay?
Good luck. Okay, bye.
Take care, everyone.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
So much. Have a
Bye-bye.
wonderful day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.